Hello and welcome to the Running Man exercise. This exercise is just sort of offering you guys at this point another sort of way to animate and to also sort of introduce the use of imagery like this to assist you. This is a pretty straightforward exercise. It's going to introduce a couple different ideas, reinforce a couple of different ideas, but again, just sort of another version of animation that almost harkens back to the frame-by-frame animation that we did towards the beginning of the semester. In order to do this exercise, you should have this runningman.jpg image in your library, and it's going to be used to help us get to this final version of this movie clip. So we're going to be ultimately making a movie clip. So I'm going to skip ahead to step 5, where we're going to insert a new symbol. So I insert a new symbol. I'm going to call this Running Man, and this should be a movie clip. As I said, we're going to be making a movie clip. So I'm going to click OK. And once we're inside the movie clip, we're actually going to create two different layers. So I'm going to create sort of two different layers over here. Remember, a movie clip has its own timeline, and we're going to sort of use that to create a little snippet that will be used in the scene in a completely different timeline. So one of these is going to be called image, and one of these is going to be called drawing. So I'm going to type image, and I'm going to type drawing. Okay, so you can probably see where this is going. We're going to have one version of this thing, which is the image, which we're going to use to basically trace and see sort of how this sort of assists us in making a pretty fluid, in this case, running man. Okay, so next thing we're do, step 7, is we're going to drag the Running Man JPEG into the image layer. So I want to make sure I'm on the image layer. I'm going to click on that keyframe. I'm going to go get my Running Man JPEG, and I'm going to put them down here. There we go. Oh, did it twice. Okay. Okay. Oop. Computer's running slow. It's a fairly large image. Okay. Next thing we're going to do, it says on the image layer, insert a frame at the frame 80. All this is doing is basically moving this thing out a little further, so we have it through frame 80 in order to be able to sort of see that it's something we can work with all the way up until frame 80. Okay, we're going to be making an animation 1 through 80, so we need this layer here so we can sort of see it throughout the duration. Okay. Step 9 says position image, the top left image on the hash mark. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this guy of the first. Okay, and I'll zoom in here so we can see this. Zoom in a little bit. Position that hash mark on the head of the first image. Now, before I go into this, and I'm sort of zoomed into this image, I want to sort of talk about this image. This is a famous photographer named Edward Muybridge. And Edward Muybridge was a photographer that was known for sort of capturing these sort of animated figures, I guess you could say, with photography, and sort of was useful in sort of the studies of anatomy and sort of how animals and humans move. So if you ever want sort of something to sort of study the movement of something by, Edward Muybridge has tons and tons of imagery of people moving, of horses running, all sorts of animated people and animals that were, again, very sort of important studies, both in photography but also in animation. Okay, so step 10, make sure the drawing layer is on the top. We have that. That's the order I did that in. And now what we're going to do is we're going to choose a brush and a fill color. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm just going to choose no stroke color, and I'm going to choose sort of a dark gray for the fill color. Okay, I'm then going to choose a brush that I'm going to draw with, And basically what we're going to do at this point is draw a sort of version of this running man, and we're going to sort of scoot him over as we draw the first version of that thing, and draw another version of that. As you probably remember, in frame-by-frame animation, we have the opportunity via this timeline to sort of show a still version of something for, in this case, it's going to be 5 frames, and then reintroduce another version of that thing. As it moves across with the playhead, this will sort of appear as a somewhat fluid version of this thing. Using this image is going to give us a much more fluid version of the running man. Okay. So what I'm going to do is step 12 here. I'm going to make sure that I'm in the first keyframe of the drawing. So the drawing is the top layer here. And I've chosen a slightly larger brush in order to sort of get this drawing done a little more efficiently. And we choose the brush size over here. We have the brush shape right here, and we have the brush size right here. Okay. Making sure I'm on the first keyframe up here, which I just talked about, I'm going to draw a version of this man. Okay. And I'm going to zoom in actually. Yeah, that's probably good. So I'm going to. And again, we're sort of somewhat stick figure-ish. And for the purposes of this exercise, I'm going to do these guys fairly quickly. You can imagine sort of having something far more accurate than this. Okay, so remember up here I can turn on and off the layer, so I can turn off the image layer, see how I feel about that. That's fine for this exercise. Again, you can imagine a much more accurate version of this thing. So step 13, insert a blank keyframe on 5. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to insert a blank keyframe. Okay, and we want it to be a blank keyframe because we want basically this version of this guy to go all the way up until frame 5, and then at frame 5 we want to reintroduce basically another version of this guy. Okay, so step 14 says move the image over so that the hash mark is on the second one. So I'm going to grab this version, or this image, and I'm going to pull this guy over so that the second version, okay, of this drawing is sort of centered on that hash mark. So you can sort of, again, see where we're headed with this. There's our first version. I'm going to make sure I'm on that keyframe, or that blank keyframe, number 5, and I'm going to draw again. So I'm going to go back, draw my little head. And with the slight variations in each of these stages of running, I'm going to okay, we can sort of start to see what is going to be some simple motion. Okay, now step 16 says draw every 5 frames so that we get sort of a finished version of this thing. Okay, I'm not going to bore you with 5 minutes of me drawing this thing. I'm going to stop the video briefly, draw mine, and sort of come back here at step what will be step 17 and talk briefly about this idea of onion skinning. So if you want to sort of wait, actually you should probably wait to sort of proceed with yours, because this onion skin idea might be helpful as you draw your 5. So I'll be back in a second. Okay, I'm back here on my version of my running man. I've completed all the stages of the animation. I've actually turned off the image layer so I can sort of take a look at this thing all by itself. And I want to sort of talk about a couple things. First, step 16 on the last frame, since this is a movie clip that will loop back. Remember, it's a timeline just like anything else, so it's going to loop back to the beginning, and that's a good thing. We want this sort of runner to keep running, so you can sort of see him, you know, running. And when he gets here, he'll go back to the beginning. So we need to insert a blank frame all the way out here, and it's on my frame 50. Okay. Now, the second thing, and you probably notice it up here, it's this little highlighted area. This is called onion skinning. And onion skinning is a concept that can be very, very helpful, especially when you're drawing what might be considered frame-by-frame animation, or hopefully for you guys, maybe creating, like we're doing right here, some movie clips of some animations that you're going to use later. Onion skinning allows you to see, and you can sort of faintly see it right here, see previous frames while you're drawing or dealing with your current frame. So right here, let's say in this instance I'm on frame 25. This is my sort of a version of my Running Man on frame 25. That's the vector graphic. It's got little dots on it. But you should see a sort of a faint version of another Running Man. This is basically the version of this guy prior. Okay, and you can sort of adjust these things to see sort of different phases of this. If I pull this in, I will only see basically frame 25 and whatever is sort of occupying frames 20 through 24. Okay, if I were to pull this out, I can see sort of different versions of that, and you might see the other one sort of pop up there. As I tighten it up, that guy goes away. This is a way to sort of see where you are going and where you've sort of come from. If I want to sort of see where I'm going, I can pull that guy further out and pull this in. So now I see my current frame, and I see, I see my frame from the past, I see my current frame, and I see the frame in the future. Okay, there are two different ways, or a couple different ways you can see these. You can see them as simple outlines. So this will give you an idea of how fluid your animation is. You might realize, oh, you know, the head's sort of in the wrong place in relation to the other ones. And you can also see it as what's more the traditional onion skin. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that because it's a good way to think about animating. You don't have to use these guys at all. You can turn them all the way off. They're just sort of a toggle, and they can be useful in terms of animating in this way. As you guys head into something like a final project, you guys are going to be animating in lots of different ways. Okay. Now, last thing we're going to do is we're going to delete the image layer. Okay. So I'm going to go here and I'm just going to delete that. Now we just have the movie clip. Okay. So this is our guy running. Okay. Now, the last thing, step 19, that we're going to do before we sort of save and test this file is we're going to create 3 different motion tweens in scene 1, so just for your regular scene, and we're going to have this guy sort of run across the screen. So in the interest of time, I'm going to pause the video again real quickly. I'm going to go back to my scene 1 and create maybe a simple ground for him to run across. Okay, here I am back, and I've sort of just popped back into scene 1. What I've done is created 2 different motion tweens with our little Running Man guy. Remember, with a movie clip, when it's on a timeline, it's not going to show the sort of animation that's inside that movie clip timeline, so it sort of looks like he's just sort of running across static. The second one in which I sort of put down, I have coming from the other side. Remember, if we put down a symbol, that symbol can be modified and transformed in this case, and it's going to flip horizontal. We did that with the bird a long time ago. So now we have the sort of man running in both directions. So I can just test this real quick. And depending on sort of how you've spaced the animation, my guy looks maybe a little bit slow, you can have him sort of running across that scene. What I want you to do is to create 3 different motion tweens. I've done 2 here, 3 different motion tweens of this guy sort of running across. Okay. The next exercise, which is going to be sort of your second exercise for this week, is going to be called ease, and that's a pretty simple exercise, but it's going to sort of dovetail what we've done here. Okay.